Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're journeying back to one of the most devastating periods in human history, the Middle Ages, specifically to confront the terrifying reality of the Great Plague, also known as the Black Death. This wasn't just a disease, it was an event that reshaped societies, economies, and the very psyche of medieval Europe. So grab a seat and let's uncover the chilling story of how a tiny bacterium brought a continent to its knees. Our story begins in the 1330s, far from the castles and cathedrals of Europe. In the dry, arid plains of Central Asia, a bacterium called Yersinia pestis was living quietly within populations of fleas, which in turn lived on rodents like the black rat and marmots. For centuries this was a localized issue, but something changed. Historians debate whether it was climate shifts or other ecological factors, but these infected rodents and their fleas began to move, spreading along the bustling trade routes of the Silk Road. By 1346, the plague had reached the Black Sea, arriving at the Genoese trading post of Kaffa in the Crimean Peninsula. What happened here is one of history's first recorded instances of biological warfare. The Mongol army, led by Yani Beg, was besieging the city. When the plague broke out among their own ranks, they decided to share their misery. They used catapults to launch the infected bodies of their dead soldiers over the city walls. The Genoese traders, horrified, fled the city by sea, but it was too late. The plague was now on their ships, hidden among the cargo, the crew, and the rats that scurried in the holds. In October 1347, 12 of these Genoese ships docked at the port of Messina in Sicily. The people of Messina gathered at the harbor to greet them, but what they saw was a ghost fleet. Most of the sailors aboard were either dead or gravely ill, covered in strange black boils that oozed blood and pus. The Sicilian authorities quickly ordered the ships to leave, but the damage was done. Infected rats had already scurried ashore, and the plague had its foothold in Europe. From Sicily, the Black Death spread with terrifying speed. It was a perfect storm. Medieval Europe was densely populated, cities were crowded and unsanitary, and people had no understanding of germ theory. They didn't know that the enemy was microscopic, carried by the very fleas on the rats that were commonplace in every home and street. The disease manifested in several forms. The most common was the bubonic plague, named for the painful swollen lymph nodes or buboes that appeared in the groin, armpits, and neck. This form was spread by flea bites. Then there was the pneumonic plague, which attacked the lungs and could be spread from person to person through coughing. And the deadliest of all was the septicemic plague, where the bacteria entered the bloodstream directly, causing death within hours, often before any symptoms could even develop. Imagine the sheer terror. One day your neighbor is healthy, the next day have a fever and strange black swellings, and within a week, they're gone. People tried everything they could think of to stop it. Doctors, with their beaked masks stuffed with herbs, believed the plague was caused by miasma, or bad air. They prescribed treatments like bloodletting, lancing the buboes, and bathing in vinegar or rose water. None of it worked. People turned to religion, believing the plague was a divine punishment for their sins. Processions of flagellants marched from town to town, whipping themselves in public displays of penance, hoping to appease an angry god. But tragically, these crowded gatherings only helped the disease spread faster. The social fabric of medieval society began to unravel. Fear and paranoia were everywhere. Family members abandoned their sick loved ones. Priests, who were needed to give last rites, often refused to enter infected homes. Entire villages were wiped out. The chronicler Agnolo di Tura from Siena wrote, "Father abandoned child, wife husband, one brother another. And I, Agnolo di Tura, buried my 5 children with my own hands." His words paint a picture of complete societal breakdown. The sheer scale of death was overwhelming. In cities like Florence, so many people died that there was no one left to bury them. Mass graves were dug, and bodies were piled up like layers of lasagna with dirt in between. Economically, the consequences were profound. With a huge portion of the workforce gone, agriculture collapsed. Fields lay fallow, crops rotted, and livestock wandered untended. This led to widespread famine, adding another layer of suffering. However, this devastation had an unexpected, long-term silver lining for the survivors. The massive labor shortage meant that peasants and laborers were suddenly in high demand. For the first time, they had bargaining power. They could demand higher wages and better working conditions. This shift began to erode the rigid feudal system that had defined the Middle Ages for centuries. The old bonds of serfdom started to weaken, paving the way for a new, more modern economic structure. By 1351, the worst of the pandemic had passed, but it was far from over. The plague would return in waves for centuries, though never again with the same ferocity as that first outbreak. The final death toll is staggering. It's estimated that the Black Death killed between 30% and 60% of Europe's population. That's anywhere from 75 to 200 million people. Let that sink in. It was a demographic catastrophe on a scale that is almost impossible for us to comprehend today. The Black Death left an indelible mark on the world. It changed the course of European history, accelerating the end of the Middle Ages and helping to usher in the Renaissance. Art and literature became obsessed with themes of death and mortality. The Church's authority was questioned, as prayers and piety had failed to stop the pestilence. Science and medicine, having been proven so utterly helpless, were forced to evolve, slowly moving away from superstition and towards observation and evidence. The story of the Great Plague is a somber reminder of the fragility of human civilization in the face of disease. It shows us how quickly our world can be turned upside down. But it's also a story of resilience. Humanity endured, societies rebuilt, and life eventually went on. The survivors and their descendants built a new world from the ashes of the old one. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's darkest chapters. It's a sobering topic, but understanding our past is crucial to navigating our present and future. If you found this video interesting, please give it a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more journeys into history. Let me know in the comments what historical event you'd like to explore next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.